The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
A man kneeled during Donald Trump's replacement White House national anthem ceremony. And of course, the fact that there was a White House national anthem ceremony would be a story in and of itself, but we're going to talk about exactly what happened. And the story is about a man that some are calling a national hero. And yesterday I told you that Donald Trump canceled the invitation of Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles players to the White House. And Trump said that the reason for the cancellation was related to their disrespect for the national anthem in connection with those kneeling protests that took place in the NFL in the last season or two. Now, it was ridiculous at its face because no Eagles players kneeled during the national anthem, not during the Super Bowl, not during the entire last football season. So by definition, that reason is a joke. Whether Trump knew it was a lie or is using it ignorantly, we don't know. More likely, it was either, number one, that Trump didn't want to be embarrassed because only 10 of the more than 50 Philadelphia Eagles players planned to go, or because he wanted to distract from the terrible Russia-related news over the last 24 hours. It involved Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort. That might explain why Trump also flipped out on Jeff Sessions on Twitter again. We don't really know what the real reason was that the Philadelphia Eagles were uninvited from the White House. But it really can't have anything to do with kneeling because none of them actually kneeled during the national anthem last season. So anyway, Trump cancels the visit, says instead he's going to hold a real patriotic national anthem ceremony at the White House. It is going to be for real patriots, all of whom are going to stand during the anthem. And of course, it'll be open to the Philadelphia Eagles fans who were expecting to see their heroic players at the White House, but weren't, because Trump uninvited them. And Trump actually did this. He spoke about at the rally how important it is to stand and not to kneel during the anthem. And this is just the best because a guy, at least one guy, kneeled during the anthem. It ended up being a relatively small group of people who showed up at the White House for the stupid event. And Danish news channel TV2 reported on this guy kneeling during the entire thing at the White House. You see him in a picture over my shoulder. Notice also that in all the pictures and videos we're going to play for you today, there is not a single non-white person, period, that can be identified at this event. So here's a tweet from Danish television where they said, quote, "At the White House, one guy in the audience took a knee during the national anthem. At President Trump's celebration of America, no Eagles event. Left right after, didn't want to talk." We also have video of the guy. Take a look at this. Does anybody else understand the hilarity of this? More people have now kneeled during the national anthem ceremonies conducted at the White House than the number of NFL players, of Philadelphia Eagles players that kneeled during games the entire 2017 season. Yet the reason that this ceremony even took place was that the Eagles weren't being respectful to the national anthem. We are in bizarro world, and every aspect of this was just dumb. It was also supposed to be an event for all of the Eagles fans who, I guess, went to D.C. for their team's visit. But very clearly, the crowd at this thing was just random people. One example is Tim Furlong, who's a reporter for Philadelphia's NBC 10 station, who on Twitter said, "I've asked 6 of the fans at the White House who was the Eagles quarterback during the Super Bowl. Not one person knew." So this entire thing is the sort of propagandistic nonsense that we see in authoritarian countries, right? The sort of forced allegiance to the flag stuff, the over-involvement from leaders about exactly what you're allowed to do, either when the national anthem plays or when there's a picture on the wall of Kim Il-sung, for example, right? This is the same type of stuff that we see in other countries with forced patriotic sort of tribalism. And this is the administration at large, right? It's a pathetic and embarrassing joke sort of at the macro, but then even at the micro level, this is the type of stuff we're seeing. And I guess there's a possibility that this wasn't the only guy kneeling. There was another guy who might have been kneeling. He might have just been in a wheelchair. It wasn't totally clear. CNN was reporting on it. But possibly multiple people kneeling during a ceremony that only is being held because Donald Trump wants to show how forcefully he is against kneeling during the national anthem. I mean, just a pathetic gong show that this administration has become. So, okay, we already covered the fake fan rally for fans of the Philadelphia Eagles who were disinvited from the White House. But it was just random people who showed up, right? Not Philadelphia Eagles fans. So anyway, I've got cringe video for you, or as Jon Stewart might have called it years ago, a moment of Zen video. I have video for you from yesterday's fake fan rally where Donald Trump tries to sing God Bless America, but clearly doesn't know the words beyond like the first line, but he doesn't stop singing. Instead, he does this sort of awkward, I don't even know what, he does something awkward. I don't even really know how to describe it in the English language. Check out the video, which I know is not going to do much for our audio audience, people listening on the radio and to the audio podcast. But if you're just listening, I would encourage you to check out the video when you have a moment. Trump just looks confused during the singing of God Bless America here. Prairies he knew. This is a moment indistinguishable from an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, right? I mean, this is Larry David. Who has a better grasp of the lyrics to this song? Trump or the Philadelphia Eagles players who were disinvited from the White House? And it's not any better during the national anthem either. Remember this one? Anyway, the really sad thing about all of this is that we have a government, or I guess an administration, I should say, that is increasingly obsessed with these mandatory displays of the version of patriotism that they approve of, right? Kneeling during the national anthem to shine a light on racial inequalities, that's not patriotic. Mandatory standing motionless, looking at the flag during any playing of the national anthem, that's real patriotism. Refusing to bake a cake for a gay wedding, that's a patriotic expression of one's First Amendment right. Kneeling during the national anthem, which of course doesn't refuse anybody service on the basis of their sexual orientation, that's apparently not the flavor of free speech that should be respected, and certainly not celebrated if you're part of this administration. So let me see if I can explain this. Layer one of the sadness here is that the administration is focused on things like fake and staged patriotism and the anthem and what football players do, right? That's sort of a basic tragedy of what's going on. Layer two of the tragedy is that tons of people are falling for it while we continue to have no net neutrality. We're destroying the environment. Our healthcare system is a disaster. Wages are completely stagnant. 40% of Americans don't have $400 to cover an unexpected emergency. And there is so much at stake here. And Republicans and Trump are moving backwards on the things that really matter. And Trump has actually successfully made it about the national anthem and kneeling and singing songs. And the only hope here, you know what the only hope is, right, Pat? I mean, I'm a broken record on this at this point.
Got to get to the polls. Got to vote.
Got to vote in 2018. Got to vote in 2018. And I don't know about you, but I'm increasingly skeptical that that's going to happen because I know you've been following it, Pat. I've been following it. Voter enthusiasm from the left has waned a little bit. The advantage on the generic ballot for Democrats has waned. I'm actually very worried people aren't going to vote.
Yesterday was the biggest primary day of the season.
Yeah.
Mixed results, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
It wasn't the best night for Democrats, but we're going to cover that more on the bonus show today.
Yeah, but we'll talk about the primary results from yesterday. But I am not, I am not massively optimistic about the midterm elections, unfortunately. Send me your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman, and the show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Big thank you to Alicia Marcano, who's today's David Pakman Show new member of the day. She signed up at joinpakman.com, and I really, really appreciate you, Alicia. Also want to say thanks to Dylan Henderson. Dylan has been a member since 2012, going on 6 years of membership. Dylan's our long-term member of the day. Alicia Marcano, our new member of the day, and you can sign up and maybe someday be featured both as new member of the day and sustaining member of the day at joinpakman.com. You can also make pledges of as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. All right, we have a very, very special episode of Hatriot Mail this week. Just a quick reminder of what we're talking about when we talk about Hatriot Mail.
If Ayn Rand and Ronald Reagan had a baby and suckled that child off the teat of liberty, its cries would sound a little something like Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
I believe that this week's Hatriot Mail contains the coining of the best new phrase in any way related to the David Pakman Show, better than the term Hatriot Mail itself, better than when Lewis combined feverish and fervent into feverent. This could be, for the duration of the David Pakman Show, the best new phrase or word that has ever been catalyzed by the program. Let's take a listen to this week's Hatriot Mail.
Wow, how disingenuous of you, David. Nice sponsor button, by the way. An ad hom of him, Jordan Peterson, just chalk you up as a shill to smear a man in the name of views. Clinical psychologist who's helped millions of people take responsibility of their own lives. He's like Deepak Chopra? Because he's read studies that apes innately have a God belief through an evolutionary lens. Perhaps the only charlatan is the man you see in the mirror.
You just can't make this stuff up. Ad hom of him. Ad hom of him, as opposed to ad hominem, which of course is a logical fallacy, which means to the man or a personal attack. I did an ad hom of him of Jordan Peterson. Please get that into Urban Dictionary and send me a link, and we will do a segment. Ad hom of him. I just don't think we'll ever surpass it.
It was an ad hom of Jordan Peterson. You ad hommed him.
I ad hommed him. Yeah, right. It's in a way, it's sort of perfectly logical if in some very strange way. Make Hatriots cry by signing up for membership using the coupon code Hatriot40. Every time you sign up for a membership using the code Hatriot40, Hatriot40, 10 Hatriots cry, and you save 40%. So a very exciting coupon code that you can use at joinpakman.com. Okay, I have a big announcement to make. We are going to be having a David Pakman Show chess. It's not really a chess tournament because it's just going to be one game, at least initially. But the background on this is that I casually mentioned in a story a few weeks ago when people said, hey, David, are you D. Pakman on chess.com? And I said, yes, I am. I'm D. Pakman on chess.com. I've been playing chess on chess.com, but I'm terrible. The chess playing contingent of the David Pakman Show audience just exploded, and I got like 50 or 60 challenges on chess.com from people. I accepted many of them. I lost most of those matches because I'm not very, very good. But there was a big demand for me to play a game of chess against producer Pat. Now, Pat, unfortunately, plays chess even less than me. So what we're going to be doing is a live chess match where it will be Pat and Max, producers Pat and Max, will be facing off against me in a live chess match. It will be live streamed when we get to 2,000 patrons at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Okay. And our Patreon page has really suffered over the last few months. And really, this all started when Patreon announced that they were going to be passing on a bunch of the fee for each payment to the patron. And even though they eventually backed off of that policy change, it really irreversibly hurt us because a ton of people canceled their Patreon pledges. So the pitch is we are recommitting ourselves to growing the Patreon base of support. We are on the brink, by the way, of announcing that the show is going to get about 10% longer every single day because we are going to be removing more commercials from the show. We are doing all of these things in order to improve the program, but they do come with the sort of accounting reality that we've got to make up some of that lost Patreon money. Okay, so it does not matter to me whether you make a pledge of $1, $25, $1,000, doesn't matter what it is. Dollar pledges, if we get 140 or however many it is that we need dollar pledges, we get to 2,000, we will have this live chess match. And we were even talking a little bit, Pat, rather, about the possibility of maybe offering tickets to people who want to come into the studio to be here live for the chess match, which we will be live streaming. The logistics are a little tough. I don't know what the cutoff would be for a contribution, but I think that this is going to be absolutely stunning. Are you starting to prepare?
Oh, yeah. It's been a lot of long nights in the library, playing as much as I can. I think you should be shaking in your boots because while you may be the superior chess player,
right,
2 heads are better than 1. And I think we got your numbers.
Yeah, and it's not going to be a game where the time limit will be so short. Like if it's really a fast game, like 5 minutes on each side or even 10 minutes on each side, conferring with someone else can be difficult because you very quickly start to run out of time. And we would prefer that the game not end on a time loss, but rather on checkmate or a draw, of course. So I think that we're going to do 15 minutes for each side, meaning the game could be a maximum of a half hour, which I think, Pat, would give enough time for you guys to confer about what your next move is going to be.
I think a half an hour is plenty of time. Of course, if we win, that's great for us. If we lose, the game was rigged.
Yes, of course.
So I'll be a sore loser about it.
And, the truth is, I would not be surprised, nor would I be offended if people start reaching out to Pat with advice on, hey, listen, here's the opening you should consider because it gives you the best sort of statistical chance of at least being in this thing. I think also we're deciding that since I play more chess than Pat and Max, I don't think either of them really play chess, that we will not leave who plays black and who plays white up to chance. I will let you guys play white, which does confer a slight advantage. And I think most chess players, I know my win percentage is higher playing as white than black. So I'm willing to concede that right off the bat.
Is smack talking big in the chess world? Because I'd love to do some of that.
It's not really because most people disable chat so that they're not tied up with riffraff like that. But I mean, we'll be in the same room. So I think that is certainly a possibility. So 2,000 patrons and we will be doing a live chess match. I think it'll be a really exciting thing. It'll be community building and it will be, I don't know, maybe we would even do a thing where if we get to 2,000 patrons and do the chess match, anybody who's contributing at the $50 level or higher gets to play me on chess.com, right? Like I think that's an interesting thing,
I think so too.
which we could do. So let's make it happen. I'll keep you posted and let you know what happens in the next couple days. Russian President Vladimir Putin is now saying that he and Donald Trump speak, quote, regularly on the phone. Vladimir Putin said this during an interview with Austrian television station ORF. Do we believe it? I don't know. I mean, I'm curious whether Sean Hannity participates in the phone calls. I know he puts Trump to bed via phone many, many nights of the week. I don't know if it's true. If it's true that Putin and Trump are regularly speaking on the phone, it would be notable because there are no real reports of regular phone calls between Trump and Putin. I think there's been about a call a month reported over the last several months. But Putin's goal in supporting Trump in 2016 wasn't all about Trump specifically, right? It was about creating chaos, and a way to create chaos is to claim that you regularly speak to Donald Trump, despite the fact that the White House doesn't seem to be logging the fact that Donald Trump and Putin are regularly speaking. So if Putin's telling the truth, it fits into this sort of bizarre Russia situation where there's a constant effort to hide the truth about contacts with Russia. And if Putin is lying, then it's a page straight out of Alexander Dugin's 1997 classic book, Foundations of Geopolitics, which specifically recommends that what Russia should do with regard to Western democracies is to do anything they can to create chaos, to create internal racial strife, to create circumstances that make people question whether democracy is sort of working properly or as designed. And even if not true, even if it's easily disprovable that Trump and Putin are speaking regularly, it's still going to help rile people up, right? Putin is smart. Putin knows exactly how to stir the pot. And the truth is that Russian collusion or not, there would be some contact between Trump and Putin because they're world leaders, right? So then it becomes a matter of degree and a matter of optics. If there were truly continuing to be sketchy contacts between the Trump team and Russia, you would imagine that they would be using some kind of back channel. Maybe not the failed back channel that Jared Kushner tried to set up, but no doubt there would be others. There were multiple attempts to set up back channels. We learned about the Kushner back channel attempt, the Seychelles Islands back channel attempt. And even if the communication that were of concern were between Trump and Putin directly, there could be off-the-record calls, period. So I believe the most likely scenario here is that there are Trump intermediary with Putin intermediary calls for the purposes of plausible deniability. And that's if they're dumb enough to continue coordinating. And they may well be from what we've been seeing. But the more we learn about this relationship between Putin and Trump, the more it's clear that loyalty is just not a factor here, right? Putin isn't loyal to Trump. Putin saw Trump as a tool to sow chaos in American democracy, and it worked. And as soon as Putin benefits from trying to hurt Trump or to make Trump look bad or stupid, he's going to do it. And in some ways, he's already started. And at the same line, along the same lines, Pat, Trump's not loyal to Putin either, right? He seems sort of enamored with Putin's power. He seems to admire a lot of these authoritarian dictatorial types, Turkish President Erdogan, Xi Jinping's elimination of term limits in China. I don't think there's really a matter of loyalty here one way or the other.
But I still want to know if they're talking to one another regularly. It reminds me of when Alex Jones claimed that he talks to the president now and again.
Yeah.
Like, you can't trust either party, so who knows who's telling the truth. And you can't even go to the White House press secretary and ask about it because Sarah Huckabee Sanders would probably answer that question with something like, oh, well, the president likes to talk with foreign leaders all the time. And we wouldn't get a straight answer from her.
She'll say, no, you know, that's a question that really relates to technology and phone companies, because if they were speaking by phone, a phone was used. So it doesn't really relate to the White House. You'd have to ask the phone companies about something like that. Let me know. Do you think Trump and Putin speak regularly, or do you think this is more crafty calculation from Putin merely to create even more chaos? We do have a David Pakman Show subreddit where you can discuss this and any other stories of interest, davidpakman.com/REDDIT. We will take a very brief pause and be back very shortly.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to welcome to the program today Eric Turkheimer, who's a professor of psychology at the University of Virginia. We are going to be talking about some of the controversies that are now very, very prevalent in some enclaves of the internet, and not only there, including about genetics and environment and IQ. But I think maybe first, just so we're all on the same page, let's talk a little bit about the genesis of what we now know as the modern IQ test, what it can tell us and sort of what it cannot tell us.
Well, I mean, the genesis of it, if that's where we're going to start, is back at the turn of the 20th century. It was invented by French and American investigators, largely in the context of first testing army recruits and later testing immigrants in the United States. Probably the concept of intelligence as opposed to intelligence tests themselves date back a little bit further than that to someone named Francis Galton, who was Darwin's cousin, as a matter of fact, and was a controversial figure, but in many ways an uncontested genius in the Victorian 1870s and 80s. And I think the place to start with IQ is you commonly hear people who either believe that IQ is this deep dive into what a human being is capable of on the one hand, and then people on the other side who say that it's meaningless and that it's just what the IQ tests measure, or it's just a measure of how much money your parents make, or something along those lines. And I think the important thing in thinking clearly about IQ is steering a reasonable course between those two extremes. IQ is a measurable characteristic of people beyond any doubt. If you, I mean, there's a lot of technical stuff, but if you give people a series of mental tests of almost any kind, on average, people who do well on one mental test are going to do well on other mental tests. And if you, in a slightly more sophisticated way, take an average across all those mental tests, you get an IQ score. And what that IQ score is, for sure, we can talk about whether it's anything more than this, but what it is for sure is a measure of how good someone's cognitive functioning is right now at the time they took the test. It's a description of someone, like finding out how depressed they are or anything else that a psychologist might measure. And I think if you view IQ this way, a measure of how well somebody is capable of thinking at the moment, it's not really a very controversial idea, because anybody can look around them and see that some people are functioning at a higher level than others. Some people have bigger vocabularies and can solve harder problems and do better plans. I mean, we all know that. I think what makes the idea controversial is this idea that IQ tests somehow measure this deep thing called innate intelligence. That it's not just how well you're doing right now, but this inner thing that you're born with that constrains how well you possibly can do in the world. And I don't want to say there's no evidence that that's true. I mean, there are sensible people have tried hard things to show that that's true, but it's far from obvious that that's true, and it's very, very difficult to show that it's true.
Can you talk a little bit about, I'm sure there's much more that could be said on that, but there's a lot that sort of follows from this that I want to use as sort of our baseline for establishing our conversation. There is this idea that IQ maybe represents some kind of universal measure of intelligence that's independent of culture, or geography or what have you. And then there's another view that there is some test bias, which is that the test itself is biased towards individuals from certain parts of the world with certain educations, and that it's not as universal as some might point to. Can you give us an understanding of that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a question on which there's an absolute answer. I think it's broadly true that among modern people who live in the developed world, certainly in North America and Europe, and in large parts of East Asia as well, where people are basically educated, basically abstract thinking oriented, basically book oriented. The biases in IQ tests are in fact fairly small. I mean, IQ, as far as that goes, IQ tests are much better than they were when they were first created, when they were obviously biased. And it's really not the case, I don't think, that IQ tests are, at least in obvious ways, biased against, say, poor Americans or something like that. Now, another somewhat farther out part of the IQ world is people who think it's legitimate to wander out into sub-Saharan Africa somewhere with a IQ test kit and find people who have never been to school or only to rudimentary school, may or may not be illiterate, and the whole culture of taking a test on which you try to get the right answer to get a high score just doesn't make any sense. And I think push that hard, yes, tests are obviously biased. And that's important because there are people who actually do that and take the results seriously, which I think is a huge mistake. So among most of us, I don't think test bias is a huge issue in understanding why some people get higher IQ scores than others.
Fair enough. Your work has shown that, or claimed to show, that the environment accounts for about 60% of the IQ variance among low-income children. So let's start with that 60% number. Question one is, what accounts for the variance of the other 40%?
Well, I mean, very, very broadly, genetics, though. Well, there are a lot of things to say about that. You have to be very IQ, like everything. Any measurable difference you can measure in people is to one extent or another correlated with our genes. And all that says is that sort of where we start in life and the biological input to who we become winds up correlated with where we end up. It doesn't mean that there are genes for IQ or per se or anything like that. Now, when you talk about those percentages, those percentages are a very, very complicated thing, because it's we're talking about a quantity that's called a heritability that varies from 0 to 1 and tells you within a lot of complications about the proportion of differences in people that are accounted for by differences in our genes. One way I like to think about it is it tells you how much more similar we would all be if we were all clones. And it's easy to think when you start thinking about these numbers that IQ or any trait has a heritability, and we do science to find out if the heritability of IQ is 60% or 70% or 40% or 20%, and that's wrong. IQ doesn't have a heritability. The heritability of IQ depends on the situation in which you measure it, and that depends on how much people vary genetically and environmentally. So, in fact, if you gave an IQ test to a bunch of clones, I mean, that's not possible in humans, a huge set of identical twins, everybody exactly the same, the heritability would be 0, because everyone is genetically the same and differences in genes can't account for everything. So anyway, coming back to our study, when people have computed those heritabilities in twins in the past, it's been very common. It's very hard to get poor twins in twin studies for a variety of reasons. They don't volunteer for the study. Poor families have better things to do. And we found, we didn't really find it, there was a large American twin study that included a lot of twin children raised in poverty. And what we found in that study is that among very poor children, the heritability of intelligence, the proportion that seemed to be accounted for by genes, was very, very low. It was lower than 40%. It was close to 0% in the poorest children. And then as you proceed up through the middle class into the upper middle class, there weren't a lot of rich people in this study, genes became more and more important, accounted for more and more of the variance, so by the time you got to the upper middle class, things had almost completely reversed. And that that finding, just by the way, has replicated quite well in the United States, where we have a lot of economic and educational inequality, not so much in Europe, where they have a better safety net. But that fits, I think, with a lot of common sense thinking about intelligence, which suggests that bad environments are much more important for intelligence than good environments. It's a lot, I don't mean to be flip about it, but it's a lot easier to make someone dumber than it is to make them smarter, because things that go wrong are much more important. And what I like about that finding is that it gives us a way to take the overall genetics of IQ seriously, whereas at the same time, understanding the critical importance of things like poverty and bad environments and the negative effects that those can have on children while they're growing up.
Let's pause our conversation there. We've been speaking with Eric Turkheimer, who's a professor of psychology at the University of Virginia. We'll continue our conversation with him tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Donald Trump has now officially put more tariffs on the allies of the United States than on China. And of course, he's been saying for years at this point that China is just the worst when it comes to its trade relationship with the United States. China's bad. China's killing us on trade. We've made terrible deals. They're manipulating us. They must be stopped. We will crush them. We're not winning against them anymore. They are raping us on trade. And he did put some tariffs on China, which they responded to with their own tariffs. But in total, Donald Trump has put more tariffs on longtime allies of the United States, including European allies and Canada, than he has on China. Trump is treating our allies worse than he's treating China on the issue of trade. And the obvious question is why? And if we look at the numbers, the Peterson Institute for International Economics ranked countries and regions by how much Trump's tariffs are affecting them. Check this out. If you look at U.S. steel and aluminum imports in 2017, with Canada, it's $12.4 billion. The EU, $7.7 billion. Mexico, $2.9 billion. And China, $2.9 billion. Why are we making enemies out of friends by targeting those with whom we are both allied and do a lot of trade? Is there some kind of economic payoff that economics doesn't understand, that Trump does for some reason? What this will lead to, we know, are higher prices for Americans on everything from beer cans and cars to appliances and other items, probably as soon as late this summer. There's been a sort of non-economic argument from Trump, which is there's a national security issue here, right? We need to have enough metal to build tanks and also for our own industries. But by putting these tariffs on, any benefit to the American steel and aluminum industries is going to be outweighed by higher prices on a ton of stuff that's going to get more expensive for hundreds of millions of Americans. And for me, the national security explanation has been patently bogus from the beginning. The places we get our steel and aluminum from to build military equipment is our allies. So I don't really even understand how you can concoct a situation where it's a national security issue. And the other sort of thing to think about economically at the macro level is that these tariffs are going to undo the big celebrated tax cuts for the middle class that came from Donald Trump, right? If we grant that in the short term, so-called middle class households will get about $900 in their pocket a year from Trump's tax reform, will they or not? You know, we could debate that. If you pay a little bit more on all the stuff or a lot of the items that you're going to buy over the course of a year, those $900 in tax cuts evaporate pretty quickly. And lastly, Trump told us he was going to renegotiate NAFTA for our benefit with Canada and Mexico. How on earth do you renegotiate that in good faith when you just tariffed those two countries? So more than likely, this is going to be, number one, another campaign promise from Trump that evaporates. There won't be any renegotiation of NAFTA. Number two, it's going to be something that's not good for the average American, which, remember, that was who Trump was targeting as "I will help you." It wasn't all about helping the poor. He claimed he was going to drain the swamp and not just be helping the rich. The whole pitch was it's going to be good for the little guy. It's going to be good for the average person. So here's my question to you that I'd love to hear about, either through Twitter or Facebook or wherever else. Is Trump's tariff clown show stupidity, or is it thinly veiled corruption? In other words, is he doing this because he genuinely believes that putting these tariffs on our allies above and beyond what he's doing with China is going to be good for the economy, that it is actually going to achieve what he said he wanted to achieve when he was running for president of the United States? Does he just not understand the impact of these tariffs? Or is it a way to do cronyism and swamp-filling corruption, the likes of which he's been doing since he became president of the United States in a number of different ways? That's my question to you. Stupidity, corruption, or maybe both? Let me know. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. I am ready to say, and I know that there are people, including friends of mine, who are going to be upset with me for saying this, it's time for MSNBC to fire Joy-Ann Reid. And I don't mean just because her show is terrible. I mean because at this point, she simply has no credibility based on the bogus explanations she has given for some horrible blog posts that have been uncovered from her website in the past. Homophobic blog posts, conspiratorial blog posts. And I don't know that I've ever even mentioned Joy Reid on the program before. She's an MSNBC host. She really epitomizes the corporate establishment wing of the Democratic Party, period. I've never seen her say anything interesting ever. But her presence at MSNBC now has actually become proactively embarrassing since she started claiming that her homophobic blog posts of the past were the result of someone hacking her website, hacking for which there has been no evidence actually took place. So let me catch you up on the story. Late last year, some old homophobic blog posts of Joy Reid surfaced on social media. And in the posts, she was calling certain politicians closeted gay guys. She was using gay sex to mock people. She was talking about how finding gay sex repugnant is logical. Genuinely blog posts that were damaging to the LGBT community. And she immediately said that she thought that her blog may have been hacked because she didn't write or didn't remember writing any of that stuff. And of course, totally predictably, there was no evidence that any of that hacking actually took place. And the hubbub sort of died down. And then somehow, last week, when the racist comments from Roseanne Barr exploded on Twitter, I turn MSNBC on for a few minutes, and in they bring Joy-Ann Reid to talk about the inappropriate nature of the comments, because I guess she had just hosted some kind of panel with Valerie Jarrett, who was the target of Roseanne's comments. Why on earth would you bring on Joy Reid to talk about what's inappropriate when she wrote countless inappropriate blog posts? And now it's getting even worse. It has now been revealed that Joy-Ann Reid previously promoted a 9/11 conspiracy movie co-produced by none other than Alex Jones in a blog post called The Official Story back in 2006. In another blog post, she said that it was suspicious that the government identified the 9/11 plotters so quickly. And then she went on to question why the buildings fell at all. She also suggested in a post that Ann Coulter might really be a man, which is also just completely in poor taste and not any kind of argument whatsoever. So MSNBC is embarrassing itself by not firing her. And I have people who, when I tweeted that it's time to fire her, they said, David, you can't compare what Roseanne did to what Joy-Ann Reid did. Roseanne said crazy things right now, and Joy-Ann Reid said she has changed her views and doesn't think this stuff anymore. That's fine, but she's been blatantly dishonest in talking about hacking for a long time about this. I don't think she believes for one fraction of a second that she was actually hacked. And she's basically saying, you know, I did have some views that I changed my mind on, and people evolve, but the blog posts were fake and I was hacked. The Daily Beast has temporarily suspended her column. She's no longer getting a Straight for Equality in Media award from a gay rights group. But I believe it is time for MSNBC to do the right thing and fire her. I don't know if you disagree with me, Pat.
I have mixed feelings. If it was just about the homophobic blog posts, that would be one thing, because it was during the early 2000s when very few people understood LGBT issues. Gay marriage was not the law of the land yet. So, you know, looking back, she could, if she was able to apologize for that, I think she would have been able to weather that storm. Same thing when it comes to like 9/11 conspiracy theories. At one point, I think up to a third of Americans thought that the government was responsible for 9/11. So if she just came out and gave a full apology, said that I've evolved on these issues and I no longer think this way, then I think we would be able to excuse it. But the hacking excuse, the amnesia excuse, it's a bridge too far. And I think MSNBC, if they don't fire her, they should at least, have the tone sensitivity to know that she shouldn't be talking about like the Roseanne Barr issue and inappropriate comments like that.
Send me your thoughts. I know this is going to be polarizing for the audience. If I am wrong, tell me specifically why. And it should not simply be that what Roseanne did is worse, right? That's not really an argument, because what I'm laying out here is a total lack of credibility on this entire hacking explanation, and she just can't remember, and it really doesn't sound like something she would have written, although, yes, she did have views before that she no longer holds. If I'm wrong, tell me why. I welcome your constructive criticism. I am tolerant of the trolling that I'm going to get, but I actually welcome the constructive criticism. Best place, probably Twitter, where I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. Okay, we've got a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Let's take a listen to what the Eggman said. Now, the Eggman is saying something that a lot of people wrote to me, and they said, David, you were supposed to be keeping Hatriot Mail guy's name a secret, but you accidentally said his name yesterday during your segment about it. And I am convinced that I didn't. And the Eggman's voicemail, I think, explains to us what the misunderstanding is.
Dude, I don't know what's the bigger revelation here, that you called out your voiceover guy's name as Pete. That's the first little crumb that we get. And also, why the hell is Pete listening to right-wing radio? Dude, what's going on there, man?
Yeah, so the Hatriot Mail guy's name is not Pete, but 5 or 10 people wrote to me and they said, hey, David, why did you name Pete as Hatriot Mail guy? I thought you were supposed to keep his identity secret. I think I said he, because the guy's name is not Pete, and I didn't say his name, and I also didn't say Pete. So I think it must just be, I said something that sounded like he, right?
Yeah, I heard he when we did it live, but after this controversy started up, I took a look at the clip again, and I could see how some people may have thought you said Pete.
Yeah.
You said he, but Peter is a pretty common male name, so there is a chance, I guess, that Hatriot Mail guy's name is Pete, even though you try to brush that off.
Yeah, it's not. It's not Pete. And of course it could be, but it's not. And I think really the bigger apology is not to Hatriot Mail guy, but it's actually to Dana Loesch, because it turns out that she has been doing these hate mail hate mail.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called. Anyway, she's been doing what we identified as suspiciously similar to Hatriot Mail for many, many years. So my suggestion that she copied it from us, I take back. I don't know if she's been doing the deep voice announcer intro all that time, but she very, very angrily tweeted me, and a lot of her followers were dogpiling me on Twitter. So you know what? She independently developed the hate mail bag concept for her show. We developed our version, which we call Hatriot Mail. I have no reason to believe at this time that anybody plagiarized anybody, and I apologize. I was wrong. And it's not about what the meaning of the word is. I was just wrong. There's no caveat. I'm not apologizing. If anyone was offended, Pat, I'm just straight up apologizing because she didn't copy it from us, at least not in its original form. And I'm sorry. I made a mistake having never heard her program before. Hatriot Mail guy. You know what we have revealed, actually? Yes. Hatriot Mail guy is very good at reading Hatriot Mail. He's not so good at segment production, and that he ended up actually proposing a segment to us, which led to me having to apologize today. So I think he owes us a few maybe extra Hatriot Mails. We have a great bonus show for you today. We will talk about yesterday's primary results. We will talk about Miss America scrapping the swimsuit competition. How upset is Pat about that? And we will also talk about the swatting of Parkland student activist David Hogg. All of those stories and more on the bonus show. Join Pacman.com to access the bonus show instantly.
The David Pacman Show at davidpacman.com.